snake. And according to some people, the snake is a cobra. According to others, it is a water snake. Yeah, probably doesn't matter. Yeah, what matters is that it is a poisonous and bad snake. That's what matters. Otherwise, the simile doesn't work. Yeah. So it is a bad kind of snake. Yeah. And this is a very nice sutta in a number of different ways. It is actually a very profound sutta. It's a sutta about non-self and what that means from a Buddhist point of view. And really, we should do the whole sutta. The problem is that the whole sutta will take about a week to do. So we can't do that. We have to kind of just pick out the best parts. And one of the things that the sutta is famous for, apart from the fact that it is about non-self, is for these two similes that it comes at the beginning of the sutta. And one of the most, to me, always most inspiring things about the teachings of the Buddha are the similes in the teachings of the Buddha. They are often very powerful, they're very instructive, they are often much more interesting than just bare prose. If you have bare prose, it kind of gets a bit boring, but the similes kind of bring everything alive in a very powerful way. And this is very, very quite amazing and remarkable about the Buddha's ability to teach, is his ability to choose similes that really illuminate and illustrate the points of the Dhamma in very powerful ways. And these two similes we're going to have a look at today are two of maybe the most famous similes in all the suttas. One of them is called the simile of the snake, the other one is called the simile of the raft. And they are famous because they are also referred to in other suttas. One of the things about the suttas is that they tend to refer to each other. Yeah, it's kind of another place it may not mention the simile of the snake, but actually it's found in this sutta. And so the whole suttas kind of function as a complete whole, and they refer back and forth to each other, and you can't really understand the whole unless you can't understand the parts without understanding the whole. So this is also one of the reasons to think that these suttas, they belong together, one time period, one kind of author behind these things, and it gives them that sense of authenticity of being part of one package, so to speak. So the simile of the snake. So let's just see what it has to say. I should maybe say a little bit about the background to this. So the sutta starts out with a monk called Aritta. And Aritta, he argues that there is no problem with sensual pleasures. Sensual pleasures are okay. And in other words, even if you are a monk, there's no problem with sensual pleasures. And the monk said to him, don't say that. The Buddha said there is a problem. You shouldn't go against the Buddha. That's bad to go against the Buddha. And he says, no, I disagree. Or he doesn't say I disagree. I think what the Buddha says is that sensual pleasures is okay. Even though the Buddha says it's not okay, I think he says it's okay. Something like that. It's a really distorted argument, very, very hard to make any sense of. And then the Buddha comes along and tells him off, for in the same way. And then I think after a while he becomes glum and looks down and his shoulders drooping and he feels a bit, if the Buddha tells you off, then it's kind of difficult to keep on arguing, I suppose. I don't know how you would feel if the Buddha came and told you off. That would be kind of difficult, wouldn't it? The Buddha doesn't tell people off very often, but sometimes when the views are really wrong and really bad, then the Buddha will say something. And then after having told this monk off, then he comes up with the simile of the snake. And the simile of the snake kind of illustrates this point of having wrong view, misunderstanding the Dhamma, and what happens when you misunderstand. This is what this really is about. So let's see what the Buddha has to say about this. I'm going to read it out first of all, and then I'm going to discuss it in details afterwards. This is how it goes. This, by the way, is translations by Bhante Sujato, who you may know. Any one of you never heard of Bhante Sujato? Everyone heard of Bhante Sujato? Wow, okay, amazing. Okay, so he is the mastermind behind Sutta Central, one of the most important websites in the world when it comes to suttas. It's kind of amazing. I think now it is probably the most visited sutta website in the world, which is kind of amazing that he has kind of constructed that. So you can imagine he has got a big brain, and you can know that because his head is very big. Yeah, he's got a big head and must have a big brain inside, and he uses that kind of in overdrive sometimes. So that's him. Don't tell him I said this because he might not like to hear this. Okay, so this is how it goes. Take a foolish person who memorizes the teachings. Statements, mixed prose and verse, discussions, verses, inspired exclamations, legends, stories of the past lives, amazing stories and elaborations. But they don't examine the meaning of those teachings with wisdom, and so don't come to an acceptance of them after deliberation. They memorize the teaching for the sake of finding fault and winning the debates. They don't realize the goal for which they memorize them. Because they wrongly grasp, those teachings lead to their lasting harm and suffering. Why is that? Because of the wrong grasp of the teachings. Suppose there was a person in need of a cobra, and while wandering in search of a cobra, they would see a big cobra and grasp it by the coil or the tail. But that cobra would twist back and bite them on the hand or the arm or a limb, resulting in death or death-like pain. Why is that? Because of the wrong grasp of the cobra. In the same way, a foolish person memorizes the teaching, and those teachings lead to their lasting harm and suffering. Why is that? Because of the wrong grasp of the teachings. So, kind of makes sense, yeah? I gave you the background story before of this monk Aritta who grasped the teachings in the wrong way, and this is then the response to that. It's like grasping a snake in a bad way. Do you have many snakes here in Singapore? Not, yes. Okay, some people say, have you seen many snakes in Singapore? So, not many? Okay, yeah, not so many here. Okay, so do you have a grasp the snake? Have you? No? Okay, so be careful if you're going to grasp. Today you're going to learn how to grasp the snake. This is part of the advantage of the Simile. It tells you how to do it, right? So now you're going to learn. So if you see a big cobra next time, you know what to do if you are in need of a cobra. That's what it says here, right? If you're in need of a cobra. It's kind of interesting. Anyway, so let's kind of get into the details of this. So I'm going to go back to the beginning and discuss what actually is going on here. Even though it seems obvious, there's lots of little points in this which actually are interesting. So it begins, we take a foolish person who memorizes the teachings. So a foolish person here is, the Pali word is moga purisa. Moga means someone who is like deluded, deluded, foolish, not kind of the mind is not really in the right place. And sometimes all kinds of people may memorize the teachings. You may not have all that much wisdom, but you still memorize the teachings. In those days, that is how the teachings were passed on through memory. And so if you had an interest in the spiritual life, then you would memorize them. These days, we tend to read the teachings, but it's basically the same kind of idea. So you memorize the teachings. Some people, even today, they memorize the teachings. You may, some people like to just learn teachings by heart, and then they will kind of recite like the Satipatthana Sutta or whatever, and sometimes that can be quite nice. Like sometimes here you do the Metta Sutta in English, and that can be a nice way of reflecting on it, bringing it back again and again in that way. So a foolish person memorizes the teachings. So what are these teachings that they memorize? And this is actually quite interesting, because now comes this long list that you saw before. So what is this long list about? And it starts off with statements. And there's 9 factors that we're going to look at now. There was 9 aspects to the teachings, as I read it out before. The first one was statements, and it ends up with elaborations, is the translation here by Bhante Sujato. And these are called the 9 angas. Anga is like a factor, so 9 factors of the teaching of the Buddha. And this is an ancient division of the suttas and division that you find in the suttas themselves, how the suttas were divided in those days. These days we have like the 4 Nikayas, the 4 main Nikayas, and then you have the Khuddaka Nikaya, the 5th, or you have the Agamas, which are the equivalent to the Nikayas, but that's in Sanskrit or in Chinese or in other languages. But that is a newer division of the suttas. In the most ancient division is these 9 angas, and this is what you find in the suttas themselves. And this is kind of interesting, so this is how they divided things in those days. And that will tell us, hopefully, a little bit about what kind of teachings were interesting at that particular time. What teachings were they interested in? What was the kind of the things that maybe we should focus on as well? And here it starts off with what is probably the most important ones, which are the statements. The Pali word for statement is sutta. This is how Bhante Sujato translates sutta, statements. What do you think? Shall we criticize him, or shall we kind of let him pass on that one? I think it's okay, because the way that we use the word sutta today is a bit different from how it was used then. In those days, what we now call the sutta, like a complete text, Majjhima Nikaya 22, Alagad Upama Sutta, in those days they were called suttanta, which is just another word for sutta, but it's a bit different. And sutta, therefore, was slightly different in those days. It wasn't always a complete text like that, but it was a particular kind of text. And the particular kind of text would have, according to Bhante Sujato, like a simple statement of the doctrine, a simple statement of the teachings. And that's why he calls it that. So you can imagine when the Buddha started out, he would have started with some simple teachings. You know the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the setting in motion the wheel of the Dhamma, and that starts off with some simple teachings. It's a bit more than that actually, but initially it may have come out as some simple teachings, and then you would have then elaboration on those teachings. You would often have a question and answer kind of type, which then would elaborate on them, and then it would become more gradually, it would come out, starting with simple things, gradually expanding. The more elaborate something is, the more detailed it is, the more of explanatory material it is, usually the more later it is, because it is, explanations are always later than the things they explain. So when you go to the commentaries, it's often expanded ad infinitum. Ad infinitum means like infinitely. Well, it's not quite infinite, but it's, sometimes it feels like that. So statements, sutta, simple statements of the Dhamma, of the doctrine. Then we have mixed prose and verse. This is 𝐾𝐝. And 𝐾𝐝, this is like when you read things like the certain suttas where you have verse and prose together, or you have things like the Udana. The Udana, you have first a prose introduction, you have a verse. Same thing with the Ita-Vuttaka. And this is quite a common way of presenting the suttas, mixed prose and verse. And it's a very nice way of doing things, because the prose will then establish the Dhamma, what it means. If you want to make a very clear statement about something, usually you use prose, because prose is very there's no restraints or constraints on prose. Prose, you can say things very precisely. There's no because in verse you have constraints. A verse gives you a certain number of syllables, maybe, that kind of thing. So a verse doesn't have the same precision in terms of stating something. So verse is more for inspiration. So when you read verse, you can often feel very inspired. It kind of rhymes well, it flows well, it has a certain rhythm to it. And sometimes we don't see that, because the Pali has a rhythm, but then when you translate into English, you lose the whole rhythm, because it's very difficult to translate rhythm. It's obviously. So meaning becomes more important. So you lose that aspect of the Pali sometimes. But in Pali, the rhythm can be very nice. This is called meter in Pali. Meter means that there's a certain... all the syllables in Pali are either long or short. So meter means there's a certain sequence of long and short syllables. Then it gets a kind of nice flow to it. And so these are the two different ways of transmitting the Dhamma is through verse, which is inspiring, or through prose, which often is very accurate. And then when you mix the two together, you get kind of both things at the same time, right? So you get the prose saying it, and you get it reinforced with a verse, which then gives the inspired meaning of the same thing. This is the idea behind this Gaya that we're seeing here, mixed prose and verse. So this seems to have been a very early part of how these suttas were divided, how the texts were divided. Then we have discussions. Vyakarana. Vyakarana is often like, today you might call it Q&A. Yeah, they didn't call it Q&A in those days, but the same kind of thing. And so the monks would, sometimes the Buddha would ask the monks, he would say, what do you think, monks? King-tang manyata bhikkhave, something like that. And then the monks would reply, we think this. And in the suttas, the monks always get it right. Yes, I think, I'm not sure if that was actually the way it was in those days, but in the suttas, they have kind of fixed it up, so the monks always get it right. And the Buddha says, yes, well done, monks. Okay, next question, and it kind of goes on like that. But this is a very important way of teaching the Dhamma. It's very interesting, Q&A, discussion back and forth. And it's very important for us in the present day to recognize that that is how the Dhamma was taught from the very beginning. This should be a back and forth. It should not be, Dhamma should never be a one-way street from a teacher to a student. It should always be a chance for the student to ask questions, even to disagree, not to kind of use harsh language, but to disagree in a friendly way, Of course, this is important. And then we can kind of resolve issues on the way here. And that really matters a lot. And I think everyone knows that if you feel that you are engaged, you learn more. If you become a passive recipient, you don't really learn all that much. You kind of, I remember many years ago I had to give a talk here this was actually here in Singapore, it was ВESAK many years ago, and the BF had the bright idea of having a multicultural event on that ВESAK day. And so they brought in all these people from different religions. Remember that, Eiling, many years ago? Were you there? It probably was. It was probably a very good idea, actually. I'm just messing around. But because everyone there was from different religions, there was a few Buddhists there, but many were Muslims, some of them were Christians, and everyone brought together. Most of them were completely, utterly uninterested in what I had to say. Completely uninterested. They were like, or they were on their mobile phone doing things. And it's actually it's very difficult to speak when people are not interested, because there's no sense of communication, right? So why do you even talk if no one is interested? And so having that sense of creating interest through discussion is actually very important. Engaging everyone, is easy for the speaker, it's also easy for the audience, it's better for everyone. And so, because I remember that was really hard. It was like I had a really hard time. I had promised I was going to talk for an hour or whatever, but my mind has stopped working after a while because no one seemed to be interested. Right? It's very fascinating. So, okay. So that's discussions for you. So now, then we have verses. These are gathas, and lots of gathas in the Dhamma. And we have whole collections that are just gathas, like the Dhammapada, the Thera Gatha, the Theri Gatha. And these are often very inspirational. I really recommend you to read some of the verses in the Sutta collection, because they're very inspirational. And things like the Thera Gatha and Theri Gatha are also very interesting, because these are the poems, not of the Buddha, but of the disciples, male and female disciples of the Buddha. And I know that sometimes for women, they feel, what happened to the nuns? There's not many teachings from the nuns in here. Okay, Thera Gatha is the place to go, So you can see how women or nuns kind of dealt with the Dhamma. It's basically the same as the monks, but it has maybe a little bit of a female kind of perspective, which I think is nice, because you want everyone to feel at ease with the Dhamma. It really matters. And so the gathas are very inspiring. And one nice thing to do, is the way to use these gathas is to have the Dhammapada on your night table next to your bed at night. So the last thing you do before you go to sleep is kind of read a few gathas, You read a few gathas and and then you kind of fall asleep. Not because the gatha is boring, but because you feel so happy and at ease and relaxed. Yeah, you fall asleep nicely. Yeah, that's the reason. And then you have good dreams. Wake up in the morning, you're ready for the next day's whatever it is that you want to do the next day. So these are the gathas. So again, how the suttas were divided in the early days. Inspired exclamation, these are the udana. And this goes back all the way to the time of the Buddha. The Buddha often says, udanang udanesi. That is, he exclaims an inspired exclamation. And this happens at times, special times, when something really awesome happens, something kind of amazing happens. And one of these occasions when the Buddha does an udana udanesi, exclaims an exclamation, is during the first discourse, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, when Venerable Kondanya, Anya Kondanya, sees the Dhamma, right, becomes a stream enterer. That is when the Buddha exclaims this exclamation. He says, what does he say again now? How does it go? 𝐻𝐵𝒂𝒂𝒃 𝐿𝑒𝑏𝒂𝒂. That's right, exactly. Wow, this is pretty impressive. 𝐻𝐵𝒂𝒂𝒃 𝐿𝑒𝑏𝒂𝒂𝒃. Yeah, exactly. And Kondanya understands. Kondanya understands. It's like, it's like the Buddha is surprised almost, right? He is amazed that someone actually understands the teachings. And so he gave us this explanation. 𝐻𝐵𝒂𝒃. Vata is like, wow, indeed, it's something like that. Bo is kind of a polite particle put in there. 𝐻𝐵𝒂𝒃 means he understands, Kondanya understands. And because the Buddha, remember, he was reluctant to teach. He thought no one in the world would actually understand these teachings. And then he sort of uses the eye of the Buddha to survey the world, and he sees there are people with little dust in their eyes, and then he teaches, and it works. So I think the Buddha is very happy, that it works. The Buddha's like, wow, it works, actually working. And so that is the udanang udanesi, an inspired exclamation, a heartfelt utterance. This is what is happening here. And you find this in quite a number of places in the suttas. The Udana at that time was not a separate book. It was not a book called the Udana. It was just the ordinary utterances that happened during a sutta as the Buddha was teaching. Something marvelous happened, and then he explained an Udana. The idea of having a book called the Udana is a later development when they collected various suttas that they called the Udana. And the Udana itself, the Udana that we have today, the book called the Udana, seems to be a compilation of what was originally just verses, and then they added like a prose passage in front later on. That seems to be a later development of the Udana. The same thing with the Dhammapada. The Dhammapada probably didn't exist in the early days, so the Dhammapada is also like a compilation. And in the suttas, you will find verses scattered everywhere, and many of those are then put into the Dhammapada to make up what is now called the Dhammapada collection. In the Agamas, it's called the Udana Varga. And Udana Varga then is a Dhammapada plus Udana verses. So they are the way it has been compiled slightly differently. And so they have different names of the text as a consequence. They have the Udana Varga. In Pali, that would be the Udana Vagga, the chapter of Udanas. So inspired exclamations. Legends. Sounds interesting, doesn't it? Legends. This is iti vuttaka. Thus saidness, or something like that. Iti, thus, vutta, said. And so thus saidness, it has this kind of feeling about legend to it, something that has been said thus. You maybe don't know exactly where it comes from. And of course now in the Pali we have a book called the Iti Vuttaka, but in those days that book did not exist. There was no such book in those days. And so these Iti Vuttakas was probably something else. And one thing it may have been is like things like the Aganya Sutta. Do you know the Aganya Sutta? Another very interesting. You know the Aganya Sutta? You don't know the Aganya Sutta? Okay, you know that. There's no shame in not knowing the Aganya Sutta because very few people know these things because we have so many Sutta experts here, so they know the Aganya Sutta straight away here. Agana Sutta is like a legendary account of how society evolves from a very kind of pure and pristine state, and then it gradually declines and becomes more and more coarse. And then in the course of this, the society develops, and you get rulers, and you get the caste system, and you get all of these kind of things. That's the Aganya Sutta. It has a very beautiful Dhamma message, but it's phrased in legendary terms, as if it is some kind of ancient legend. And there's a few suttas like that, also the Dhammacakka Sihanada Sutta, the lion's roar, the Dhammacakka, the wheel-turning monarch, lion's roar of the wheel-turning monarch, something like that, a similar kind of idea. So these are then these legends, itivuttakas, and that's what they probably may have meant early on. I think it's a little bit uncertain, but this is also there. And so now we can start to see the breadth of the Buddha's teachings a little bit, right? How kind of all of these things are valid ways of teaching from a Dhamma point of view, because people are inspired by different things. Some people are very kind of straight down intellectual, okay, just give me straight sutta passages. Others need to feel a bit inspired, a little bit uplifted. Some people like stories, myth, legends. Like a legend like this is one of the things about mythology, and is that mythology are like eternal truths that are told through stories. The stories are not literally true. When you have a mythology, it's not about literal truth. It's about truths that are kind of general truths about something told through a story. And this is what these legends are about. And so when you read something like the Aganya Sutta, it shouldn't really be taken literally, but the ideas that are transmitted through the story are still true as ideas, if you know what I mean. So we need to kind of read a bit between the lines to understand what is going on. Some people really love this kind of things, something that's a bit hidden, a bit secret. It means you have to think about it, you have to reflect, and then it becomes kind of, well, now I understand. And sometimes the Buddha uses this, not very often. There are not many legendary suttas in the Tipitaka, but occasionally you do find them. Stories of past lives. What could that be? Jatakas, right? Jatakas. And again, this does not refer to what we now have as the Jataka collection, because the Jataka collection is a later collection. But this refers to what you might call the Jatakas in the suttas themselves. There are certain suttas where at the end of the sutta the Buddha says, yes, that was me in the past life. You have famous suttas like the Gatikara Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, 81 or 82? Where he talks about the past life under a previous Buddha, which is kind of very interesting. And we have a few past life stories in the Digha Nikaya, the long discourse of the Buddha, the Mahasudassana Sutta, the Mahagovinda Sutta. And then there is a very cute, maybe cute is the wrong word, a kind of cute past life story where the Buddha was a wheelwright. A wheelwright is someone who makes wheels, Wheelwright. Right means to make, some old English word which means to make. And so he was a wheelwright. And this is a very interesting story because a wheelwright in ancient India was a very low kind of profession. It wasn't a very high profession at all. In most of the stories of the Buddha's past life, the Buddha is a king or is something fabulous, something amazing. But here he's a wheelwright. How come the Buddha is a wheelwright? Shouldn't the Buddha be something more than a wheelwright? What do you reckon? Is that fair to have the Buddha as a wheelwright? Surely they could come up with something better than that. But the thing is, remember that in the Dhamma, rebirth is true, right? The Buddha had past lives. The Buddha did say that he remembered his past lives. And so this particular story of the Buddha being a wheelwright, I don't think anyone would dare to invent that, to say the Buddha was a wheelwright. You might be burnt at the stake if you said that. It's kind of sacrilege. You can't say that about the Buddha. What do you mean the Buddha was a wheelwright in the past life? And so to me, these stories that seem unusual, to me, they have a certain authenticity about them, because no one would really come up with these kind of things. The Buddhist community wouldn't allow people to invent things like that. So maybe sometimes if the Buddha is too much of a glorious king, okay, maybe some details have been added. But in this case, it is kind of, it's so low that maybe you think it is real. And of course, the Buddha did remember his past lives. So I kind of think that is quite likely, to be maybe an authentic past life story of the Buddha. It's called the Pachekana Sutta, found in the Anguttara Threes, I think 15 or something like that in the Anguttara Threes. So if you want to look it up, you can check it out. And maybe we should have done that sutta. How come we're not doing obscure suttas this year, Kim? What's going? What is the reason for that?
No reason.
No reason.
When you next come in December.
Maybe next time. Okay, so just random reasons. Okay, no real reason. Random things happen. That's why. That's the reason.
We'll do it in December.
Okay, do it in December. So that means I'm coming back in December, I presume.
After the pilgrimage.
Oh, pilgrimage. Okay, good. So these are Jatakas, stories of past life. This is a real deal in Buddhism, that we deal with past life stories. This is a very important part of the way we think about the world in Buddhism. Jatakas. Then we have amazing stories. It's nice translation, isn't it? Amazing stories. This is Abhuta Dhamma. Abhuta means like amazing and remarkable. That's what it basically means. And the classic amazing story is the story of the Buddha when he was born. That's kind of the story. The Acharya Butta Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 123. And it is quite amazing, and there are things in there that you wonder if they could possibly be true. And you think it's kind of sounds way over the top, and maybe it is over the top. The sutta is a little bit, it has a few dodgy aspects to it, so I'm not going to take everything in there for, as necessarily being true. One of the ways that we decide whether something is authentic or not, or whether it has been added to later on. Remember how religious organizations often work, and this is true for Buddhism. I think almost any kind of religious organization is that after the founder dies, then the people who come afterwards tend to elaborate, they tend to add things. And the further away you get in time from the Buddha, the more amazing the Buddha becomes. The more kind of, wow, the Buddha is just kind of becomes living in a different reality. It becomes the Dhammakaya, the eternal principle of all existence and these kind of things. And even some of the stories become actually very exaggerated and bear very little resemblance to what you find in the suttas. And so we need to remember that human tendency. We want to glorify our leaders. We want to glorify the religious founders. This is just a natural human thing. But when we remember that, it means that we take that into account when we read some of these stories. And so what you do in a sutta like this, if it seems a little bit over the top and you wonder if it could be true, then you study it more carefully. And it has been studied by many people. For example, you do a comparative study, and the Acharya Butta Sutta has parallels in Chinese translation, for example. And what you find is that there is a lot of discrepancies between the two. A lot of discrepancies usually means that there has been additions to the suttas. Very often the suttas are exactly the same, almost word for word. But okay, for example, this particular sutta we're looking at now, the Simile of the snake, it has a lot of similarities to it. Whereas this other sutta is often big discrepancies. So this is one way. But so that's on the one side, we shouldn't be too gullible about what is real Dhamma. On the other hand, we should have an open mind. I think, and this is a kind of a really difficult balance, right? When should we be skeptical? When should we not? And this is really hard. And sometimes we end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater. What is that important baby we shouldn't throw out? Rebirth. Kind of makes sense. Shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Rebirth, kind of makes sense. Because rebirth is fundamental to Buddhism. And if you throw that baby out, actually you're throwing all of Buddhism out. And I think even things like many of the psychic powers and things that are described in the suttas, I think that these things are real. And so there's many things that are real. Then there are some things that don't make sense. And so you have to kind of be very careful, and you have to use things like textual evidence to really decide what is likely to be true or not just your own opinion, because it's not neutral enough. Very often we don't know, and we change our opinions over time. Yeah, like me, I used to be very skeptical. Less skeptical now. Still skeptical, but not so skeptical. Yeah, so this is, sometimes when I hear stories, I think, no, that's not true. And I know, anyway, let's leave that aside. So these are the Abhuta Dhammas, yeah, amazing stories. Okay, so let's carry on. Last one, this is Elaborations. This is called Vedalla in the Pali language. And the Vedalla, this is exemplified by two suttas called the Chula and Maha Vedalla Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, the longer and shorter sutta on elaborations. I'm not sure now exactly what Vedalla means again, what is the root of that word. It's a slightly unusual word, but basically it means a kind of exposition, a broader exposition, in this case often also with a Q&A kind of structure to it. So these are the various kinds of texts that you found in the very earliest times. This is how these texts were divided in the very earliest days. And you can see there is a kind of a nice variety there. Yeah, there's things for the heart, things for the mind, things that are marvelous and amazing, and kind of a broad range of texts. And so the Dhamma is quite diverse, and it is for everyone. You can see that here. Does this have any effect on how we understand the Dhamma in terms of what is original and not? Maybe, maybe not. It's very difficult to really sort it out. Generally speaking, it doesn't really make that much difference. But there are various theories based on this as to what is the earliest text and how they have developed and these kind of things. And if you're interested in that sort of theory, you can read about it. There is a book called The History of Mindfulness that was written in part with this in mind, which I wouldn't recommend unless you are really, really interested in this sort of stuff. But if you are, then it can be nice. If you have an intellectual bent, then it can be interesting. But if you just want to know how to be kind and have a good heart, no need to read these things. That is the most important thing here. So these are the 9 angas in the traditions of the Sarvastivadin tradition and other traditions. They have 12 angas instead of 9, so they have added a bit more. And some of these other angas, they are the Nidana is one of them. Nidana means origin stories. And then they have, what else do they have? They have Nidanas, they have Upadesa, which means like an exposition or like a commentary almost. And then they have Apadana, which is birth stories of disciples. So a little bit like Jatakas, but birth stories of disciples. And so what that means as well is that there has been expansion in the number of angas, right? And as soon as you see expansion, that makes you wonder, what was the original number of angas? Yeah, if 12 is an expansion over 9, is 9 original? Probably not. It probably started with less than 9, right? It started maybe with 3 or 4. And so once you start to look at texts like this, you start to kind of come up with theories and how everything developed. And this is how these things, how you then can get the historical kind of understanding of the evolution of these texts based on such considerations. But it is very, I have to admit, I still find it quite speculative, those historical kind of reconstructions, and they're not super convincing. There's a lot of scope for error there. So anyway, okay. So wow. Still on the first simile, so I think we have to move on. So these are the teachings you learn, right? So you memorize these teachings. These days you read these teachings. What is the next step after memorizing them? Right? So this comes next. So what if you don't do it right? You don't examine the meaning of those teachings with wisdom. So we should examine the meaning of these teachings with wisdom. What do they actually mean? We shouldn't be too quick in thinking that we understand straight away. we should actually investigate. And one of the most powerful ways of examining the meaning of the teaching, well, first of all, is to have an overview of how all the teachings kind of fit together into one large picture. And you get that after a while. You start to understand how it all fits together. But a very important way of understanding the real meaning of these things is to ask yourself, how does it apply to you in your life? What does it feel like? What does it mean when the Buddha talks about dukkha? High-tech, high-tuk. When he talks about dukkha, what does that mean? How do I experience dukkha in my own life? So, and then it starts to really work. Okay, he says, death is dukkha. Have you had anyone die in your family? What did that feel like when someone died, right? This is how you come to start to gradually understand what these teachings are about. And one of the, just to give an example of what is very important to understand, for example, is where real happiness is to be found in the world. We are all tend to pursue happiness in the wrong place. We tend to pursue happiness in the worldly kind of happinesses. And worldly happiness means in nice food. I got to admit, food can be nice sometimes, Of course it can be. We pursue happiness in relationships. We pursue happiness in kind of, in our sense of self, having a sense of ego or status with our work, with all of these kind of things. These are called worldly happinesses, and they are incredibly unreliable and uncertain. We just don't know what's going to happen next in the world. So this is like then examining these teachings, the meaning of these teachings. When you see everything changing in the world around you, well, that's when you examine the meaning of anicca in the suttas. You see things are kind of going haywire. And then the Buddha says there is a higher kind of happiness than the worldly happiness. There is something better than having a nice fish head curry, or whatever it is that you have in Singapore. And that happiness is the spiritual happiness. It's when you do something coming from kindness, doing an act of generosity, doing something which makes you feel peaceful. And when the Buddha points it out, you start to notice it's actually, when I do an act of kindness, the happiness I feel has a different feeling to it. Instead of being imbued with craving, imbued with desire, ordinary, if you have a very nice food and you're eating it, you have a plate in front of you, it looks very beautiful, nice, good food also looks good, right? It looks good, it tastes good, it smells good, it kind of, all the senses are kind of engaged with the food, And so then when you take a morsel of that food, you chew it, and as you are chewing it, you're still watching your plate. And it means you're already craving for the next thing while you're eating this one. Are you really tasting what you're tasting? Kind of, right? But a lot of the kind of thing is actually the craving that you're having at that time. And so you're never really enjoying things properly in the first place. And that is because all of that sensual existence is often imbued with craving. We're not able to take the craving out of it. And so in the suttas, you find that people who go into a very deep state of meditation, into the jhanas, people who are aryas, the noble ones, when they taste food, they actually enjoy it more than ordinary people, which is kind of fascinating. Even though they have no desire for these things, they have lost the craving, they actually enjoy it more because they are actually able to taste. They actually feel the taste of the food. And so then when you start to investigate this, you start to realize, but when I do an act of kindness to somebody, that craving is not there. It's actually a peaceful kind of happiness. It's a happiness that is more fulfilling. It is more complete. And that's only the beginning of this path. And then you kind of build up on that. And all of these happiness have a very different taste to them than the taste that you get in the five sense realm. Quite literally, the taste. And so this is how you start to investigate these teachings. And then you start to incline towards the spiritual path because you start to understand that the Buddha is onto something. He talks about the five sense happiness being a lower kind of happiness and the spiritual happiness being higher. Why is that? And you start to understand directly through your own experience why that is the case. This is what it means to examine the meaning of these teachings. Yeah, impermanence in the world, dukkha, the various kinds of happiness that are available, etc., etc., etc. Keep it fairly simple, because if you try to investigate too complex things like vijnana, paccaya, nama, rupa, you're probably going to lose the plot. You won't be able to understand it. But the simple things can be understood because they relate to how we live the world very directly. So examine the meaning, and then you won't make the same mistake as Aritta did. Aritta said, sensual pleasure is no problem. You will understand, actually, it is a problem, because you know from your personal experience. So you examine the meaning of this teaching with wisdom. So you have to be wise. That's kind of problematic, yeah? You have to be wise. But you are already quite wise, otherwise you wouldn't be here. Isn't that true? Yeah, those people down in the street, they are the stupid ones. Yeah, they're kind of wandering around in the streets, not being here. And so there's already a bit of wisdom. The fact that you are interested in the Dhamma is really cool. You're even coming on a day like today. Today is like the kind of hardcore people come because we're dealing with suttas, yeah? And this is kind of, so that's wonderful. You're coming. Probably all of you come after work. Is that right? You've been working all day, yeah? And now you come here. Well done. Most people just want to go home and crash out. They kind of had a long week, yeah? And now they're kind of fed up. But you come here. This is wonderful. And so this shows you that you probably have plenty of wisdom to be able to investigate these things. And then, as you investigate the meaning of these teachings in this way, what happens? Then you come to an acceptance of them after deliberation, often called a reflective acceptance of these teachings. Yeah, it is reflected on, it is thought about, it is contemplated, and then you come to accept them. Yeah, the Buddha, pretty good, cool, pretty good. Yeah, he was pretty smart. Yeah, he was probably pretty wise. It's kind of interesting. I always find that a lot of the spiritual teachings that we give are not about really teaching anyone anything. It's about awakening the wisdom that you already have. Yeah, have you noticed that? Yeah, it's like someone tells something, you think, yeah, that's right. Well, that's because you already know it deep down. But when the Buddha says it, it allows you to think it with more clarity. Before, it was more like, it was probably a bit dormant. But then when someone with a lot of authority like the Buddha says this is the case, it allows you to think that thought more clearly and with more conviction. But actually, you know it already. And a lot of spiritual teachings are like that. They are about awakening something inside of us that knows the truth of these things. Some of these things we may not know the truth of, in which case we have to really investigate very deeply, but a lot of it is kind of fairly common sense, at least for those people who have common sense. Not that much common sense around. Maybe we should call it uncommon sense. So you come to the acceptance of the teachings after reflection. And so, but instead of doing that, the misguided people, they memorize the teaching for the sake of finding fault, uparamba citta, and winning debates. Yeah, you see that on the internet, Buddhists arguing with Buddhists, yeah? And sometimes you get the feeling that they're not just arguing for understanding, but they're arguing because they need to, the ego wants to win the debate. You see that sometimes, and it's not pretty. Yeah, when that happens. And so you don't really learn the teaching for that reason. You learn it because you have a real spiritual interest. And not because you want to put other people down or you want to win the debate or whatever. So it's good, it's okay to have debates, but we need to do it in the right way. And because of that, you don't realize the goal for which you memorize those teachings. The goal is all the results of the Buddhist path, not winning debates. You are wrong, I am right. Your doctrine that it took you so long to think out has been overturned. That's kind of how it goes in the suttas. It's really kind of putting people down in a fairly harsh way. Because they have wrongly grasped, those teachings lead to their lasting harm and suffering. Why? Because of their wrong grasp of the teachings. Yeah, this is kind of interesting, isn't it? If you use these teachings in the wrong way, they lead to the opposite of what they're supposed to lead to. They lead to suffering and problems instead. So we have to be careful. Don't grasp that snake by the tail. Yeah, that's kind of the message here. Yeah, don't grasp the Dhamma by in the wrong way. Suppose there was a person in need of a cobra. I find that sentence very funny. What do you mean, in need of a cobra? It's interesting. That's what the Pali says, so it's actually correct. Okay, whatever. And while wandering in search of a cobra, they would see a big cobra and grasp it by the coil or the tail. But that cobra would twist back and bite them on the hand or the arm or a limb, resulting in death or death-like pain. Why? Because of their wrong grasp of that cobra. Yeah, so please don't grasp the cobras by the tail. Much worse than grasping the cobras by the tail, grasping the Dhamma in the wrong way. You might die if you grasp the cobra by the tail. Okay, so death, okay, bad enough, but much worse to make bad karma and then have a bad result. Yeah, that is much worse for everyone. In the same way, a foolish person memorizes the teaching, and those teachings lead to their lasting harm and suffering. So there you are. This is the first simile. And then, of course, comes the reverse side. There's always the reverse side. I'll just read that quickly because I've already explained, in a way, both sides. So let's go through the reverse side. Why? Because the wrong grasp of the teaching. Now take a gentleman. So this is not the foolish person, this is a gentleman. This interesting opposition. This is the Kulaputta is the Pali word. Kulaputta means like a son of a clan, a son of a good family, or a child of a good family is even better. It means a child of a good family, yeah, so a gentleman. So I think sometimes you come from a good family and you're still stupid, but anyway, that's... So let's see. So you come from take a gentleman who memorized the teaching, the statements, the mixed prose and verse, the discussions, verses, inspired exclamations, legends, stories of past lives, amazing stories and elaboration. And once he's memorized them, he examines their meaning with wisdom and comes to an acceptance of them after deliberation. He doesn't memorize the teaching for the sake of finding fault and winning debates. He realizes the goal for which he memorized them. In other words, he becomes an arahant. He or she becomes an arahant eventually. Because they are correctly grasped, those teachings lead to his lasting welfare and happiness. Why is that? Because of his correct grasp of the teachings. Suppose there was a person in need of a cobra, and while wandering in search of a cobra, they see a big cobra and hold it down carefully with a cleft stick. Only then would they correctly grasp it by the neck. And even though that cobra might wrap its coil around that person's hand or arm or some other limb, that would not result in death or deadly suffering. Why is that? Because of the correct grasp of the cobra. So now you know how to catch a snake as well. So additional information just in case. So use a cleft stick and hold it down. But please be careful. In the same way, a gentleman memorizes the teaching, and those teachings lead to his lasting welfare and happiness. Why is that? Because of his correct grasp of the teachings. So there you are, simile of the snake. Makes sense? Yeah. So shall we go on to the second simile? Are you ready for that? Yeah, because the second simile is also very interesting, and in some ways perhaps more famous or just as famous as the simile of the snake. So let's go on to the next one. Actually, before that, so mendicants, when you understand what I have said, you should remember it accordingly. But if I have said anything that you don't understand, you should ask me about it or some competent mendicants, some competent monastics. Yeah, so this is why we should always be able to ask and always be able to discuss, because sometimes it is not clear and then we need to ask. And then you ask 2 different monks, and they give you 2 different answers. Sometimes the reality is really unfair, isn't it? And then you wonder what's going on. So anyway, what to do sometimes. Okay, now let us go on to the simile of the snake, raft rather. Simile of the raft. Mendicants, I will teach you a simile of the teaching as a raft, for crossing over, not for holding on. Listen and apply your mind well. I will speak. Yes, sir, they replied, and the Buddha said this. Suppose there was a person traveling along the road. They would see a large deluge, whose near shore was dubious and perilous, while the far shore was a sanctuary free of peril. But there was no ferry boat or bridge for crossing over. They would think, why don't I gather grass, sticks, branches, and leaves and make a raft? Riding on the raft and paddling with my hands and feet, I can safely reach the far shore. And they would do exactly that. And when they had crossed over to the far shore, they would think, this raft has been very helpful to me. Riding on the raft and paddling with my hands and feet, I have safely crossed over to the far shore. Why don't I hoist it onto my head and pick it up on my shoulders and go wherever I want? What do you think, mendicants? Will that person be doing what should be done with that raft? No, sir. And what, mendicants, should that person do with that raft? When they crossed over, they should think, this raft has been very helpful to me. Why don't I beach it on dry land, or set it adrift on the water and go wherever I want? That's what that person should do with the raft. In the same way, I've taught the simile of the teaching as a raft, for crossing over, not for holding on. By understanding the simile of the raft, you will even give up the teachings, let alone what is against the teachings. So this is very interesting. Yeah? What does it mean to give up the teachings? What does it mean that we don't hold on to the raft? Yeah, this is one of those controversial suttas, and you will actually find that there's lots of different interpretations of this, and some of those interpretations are wrong. Today, hopefully you hear the right interpretation today, hopefully. If not, then keep on searching. And you have to decide at the end of the day what you will believe or not. So let's have a look at this. Mendicants, I will teach you a simile of the teaching as a raft, for crossing over, not for holding on. Yeah, so this is very, right there, it is kind of interesting, because at what point do we not hold on? If you don't hold on while you are crossing over, you might fall off, right? So it kind of makes sense we should hold on a little bit at least while we're doing the crossing. If you kind of sit there on the raft, you're kind of rolling around, suddenly you find yourself in the water, and then you get carried down the stream. And if you get carried down the stream, there is crocodiles and alligators and sharks further down. Did you know that? It's true. There is a sutta which says that. You come into the stream, actually there are crocodiles, and that's how it talks about it. Because the stream is a stream of samsara. It takes you down, and actually this is how the suffering of samsara is often talked about. Yeah, crocodiles, sharks, whirlpools, and waves. These are the things. And you can read about it more in the Chattuma Sutta, in the Majjhima Nikaya 64, I think it is. It talks about these things. But it's also talked about in other suttas. It's a nice kind of metaphor. So please don't fall off that raft. That's what I'm saying. Hold on to the raft. Yeah? So know when to give up. Know when not to hold on. This is one of the critical things here for understanding the simile in the right way. When to hold on, when to let go. Yeah? And this is what we will kind of discover as we go along with this. Okay. Listen and apply your mind well. I will speak. Yes, sir, they replied, and the Buddha said this. So this is a kind of a standard way that the Buddha starts out, yeah, he talks about the monks to apply their minds well and to listen. And it kind of means that now you're going to come with an interesting teaching or something. This is kind of a standard way of looking at this. Suppose there was a person traveling along a road. What does that mean there? Well, it just means that the road is samsara. Yeah? Adana magga is the Pali word. And adana, the digang adanang, the long road, diga means long, the long road is a metaphor for samsaric existence. Yeah? We are all on this long road. Yeah, going on and on and on. There's no end in sight. The road kind of goes over the horizon, and when you get to the horizon, it goes on to the next horizon. When you get to that horizon, there's another horizon, and it goes on like this. And there's no kind of real destination in this road. It just keeps on going to the horizon forevermore. It's a kind of despairing road. That is the road of samsara. 𝐵𝒂𝒃 Bodhi has this beautiful translation about roaming around in samsaric existence. You know, the English word roam is like moving without destination. That's roaming, yeah? Don't have a destination. If you roam around in the streets at night of a city, you might get arrested, yeah? Because it's not considered a good thing to do, to roam around the streets. So this is the idea of traveling along a road. Yeah, this is what we're all doing in a sense. And then as you are traveling along that road, you see a large deluge. A large deluge is a large expanse of water, where the near shore is dubious and perilous. The near shore is where you are. This shore is dubious and perilous. Is that what it feels like? Does it feel? Yes, some people are agreeing. The near shore. This is perilous and dubious. Not what? Not really? Is that what you're saying? It doesn't feel perilous and dubious because you're living in Singapore. It's so safe, right? You should go somewhere else for a while. Go visit some other countries. It's the illusion that we get from living in Singapore. Yeah, you think it is very safe, but actually it's not as safe as you think. Yeah, under the surface, there's all kind of movements happening, and before you know it, it's shattered. That sense of permanence and safety is all gone before you know it. This is the problem with impermanence. Actually, things are much more unreliable than we think. We think things are reliable, and that's why we get upset when we see on TV that the world actually happens to be quite unreliable. So this shore is dubious and perilous. That's what the Buddha is saying. And so we are on this very place where things are incredibly impermanent, incredibly unreliable. You never know what's going to happen next. And then there is this large deluge. A deluge here is another metaphor for samsara. You can imagine the various realms that you have to cross, in a sense, to reach Nibbana on the other end. So this is just roughly my interpretation of this, and I think it is roughly right, although it can probably be seen in slightly different ways. So we are on the near shore, while the far shore is a sanctuary free of peril. This is Nibbana, right? This is the sanctuary free of peril. And so our job is to cross this deluge of water, this expanse of water, so we can get to the sanctuary on the other side. Sanctuary is a nice word, right? Khema is the Pali word here, the free of peril. We are looking at starting a monastery for nuns in Sri Lanka, and the preliminary name of that monastery is the Dhammadita Nuns Sanctuary. Dhammadita is the daughters of the Dhamma, right? Daughters of the Dhamma Nuns Sanctuary. That sound good? Yeah? Would you like to? Does it sound so good that you would like to go there and to attract people? We are doing this in conjunction with Dhammasara Monastery. We have lots of people in Sri Lanka who are very strong followers of Ajahn Brahm, and I also go to Sri Lanka quite regularly. And there are lots of professional people, and they are very capable of establishing something in Sri Lanka. And it's a very good place to have a monastery for nuns. Dhammasara Monastery in Perth already bursting at the seams. Too many people want to ordain. Lots of Sri Lankan women are very interested in the Dhamma. People with incredibly good credentials to become nuns. And I think having something in Sri Lanka, in the Buddhist country, is actually really a wonderful idea. For those of you who haven't been to Sri Lanka, I would really recommend you to go and visit if you have a chance. Very beautiful country, very green, lots of Buddhist history, and very strong Buddhist feeling in that country. So anyway, so that is one of the things that we are looking at. Actually, I'm working on the constitution. We work on the constitution for that monastery right now. I was in Sri Lanka recently, and I was the one who suggested the idea of starting a monastery over there. So I feel so this is why I'm talking about it. And I was very surprised. Sometimes it's like you suggest something, and everyone says, "Yeah, that's a really good idea." I was shocked. Usually when you say something, people say, "Yeah, no, that's a bad idea. Yeah, no, don't do that. Yeah, don't believe in that." Everyone agreed. This is so rare. And then usually Ajahn Brahm, he's the most difficult of all to convince. Yeah, Ajahn Brahm, there's no way he's going to agree with you. Yeah, he's going to really test you to the limit. So I said to everyone in Sri Lanka, well, it's wonderful that you all agree, but now the most highest hurdle, the most difficult hurdle of all, we have to pass, which is Ajahn Brahm. So I went back to Ajahn and I said, Ajahn, not sure how to say what to say now, or how to bring this across, but we have this idea of starting a monastery in Sri Lanka for nuns. What do you think? And he said, it's a really good idea. I was like, shocked. So isn't that great? And then I went to Dhammasara monastery, to the nuns there. They also think it's a good idea. So it's going to be like a bit of a joint venture with Dhammasara monastery in Perth. So we can have a bit of exchange and these kind of things. Anyway, we'll see what happens. I shouldn't talk too much about it because it's very, very early days still. But it looks like it's going to happen. So this is the sanctuary, yeah? Same kind of thing. So I'm getting really distracted now from what we're doing. So, sanctuary free of peril, Nibbana on the other end, and hopefully this monastery in Sri Lanka will have lots of Nibbana attainers. But there is no ferry boat or bridge for crossing over. There is no easy way across samsara. There is no God who just transports you across. This is the bad news. Yeah, in Buddhism, there is no God who can kind of say, okay, I will take you to the other side. This is why being a Buddhist is pretty tough. Yeah, we actually have to do the work ourselves. But maybe it is more realistic, and that is kind of what, of course, is interesting. But there is no bridge, there is no ferry boat, there is no ferry master who says, okay, sit down, relax, I will take you across. No, we don't have that in Buddhism. We have the Buddha who gives you the teaching, then you have to do the work yourself. Thank you very much. And then this is how it goes. And so because of that, the first thing we have to do is they would think, why don't I gather grass, sticks and branches and leaves and make a raft? The first thing we have to do is to make a raft. What does that mean? And the making of the raft is to basically understand the teachings. Yeah, that's the making of, because understanding the teachings allows you to do the practice. And so right view really is this idea of the raft. You have right view, you understand what is required. When you have right view, the actions and the intentions and everything else happens because of that right view. So that is really the raft. You can say the raft is the entire Eightfold Path, but the entire Eightfold Path really comes from right view. Right view is the engine of the Noble Eightfold Path. That's what drives the whole thing. And so you gather all of these things together, you read the suttas, you get everything sorted out, you understand these things really well through all the contemplation we talked about before, then you are ready to go across. Riding on the raft and paddling with the hands and feet, I can safely reach to far shore. Paddling with your hands and feet, that's kind of right effort. Yeah, you do the effort on the path, and then you come to the other side. And it also means meditation. It also means mindfulness and samadhi and all of these things. And they do exactly that. And when they have crossed over to the far shore, they would think, this raft has been very helpful to me. Riding on the raft and paddling with my hands and feet, I have safely crossed over to the far shore. Why don't I hoist it on my head or pick it up on my shoulders and go wherever I want? What do you think about this? This is kind of interesting, yeah, because it's not very obvious what this would mean. Because when you have come to the far shore, what is that raft? The raft is the Noble Eightfold Path. What does it mean to hoist it onto your shoulders? You have just used it to come across to the other side. So what can that possibly mean? Because the point of the Noble Eightfold Path is to transform you. You become a different kind of person, yeah, through the Noble Eightfold Path. In fact, you become the kind of person who internalizes the path. The path is now part of you. You're already inside of you, yeah? So how can you hoist it onto your head? In fact, if you have to hoist this path onto your head, pick it up, grasp hold of the Noble Eightfold Path, it means you haven't crossed yet. That's what it actually means. Yeah. And so if you feel that you still have to attach, if you still feel that the path doesn't happen automatically for you, if you feel that samadhi is not straightforward, if you feel that you're not naturally kind and full of metta and compassion, yeah, if you feel that, well then you should actually hold on to the raft, because it means you haven't crossed over yet. So you hold on to the raft until you cross over. Then when you have crossed over, the letting go of the path, you don't need to hold on, you can't hold on to it anymore because you have crossed over, you have internalized it, and so you don't hold on. Yeah? And so the point here is that you actually do hold on to this path. This is the whole point. You hold on to the raft until you come to the other shore, and then the letting go is automatic. No need to put it down, no need not to hoist it onto your head. This is actually the right way of thinking about this. So the very fact that you, so just hold on, yeah? Just hold on to the path. Don't let go too early. Don't think that you are a stream. This is the danger of thinking that you are a stream mentor if you're not. If you think you are a stream mentor, you think, oh yeah, it means I have to let go of the path. No, don't have to. It's automatic. Yeah? So don't worry about it. It just happens by itself. So hold on, until the letting go happens by itself. That is actually what is going on here. And so this is kind of interesting because this is not so easy to see in this simile, right? It's not kind of obvious. But what it also means, I think, and it goes a little bit deeper than this. Just give me 1 minute. I'm just going to shift my legs a little bit. Okay. All right. So this is what it also means. However, yeah, the idea of hoisting up these things on your head and these kind of things. It also means that when we are dealing with the Dhamma, we should yes, we should hold on to it. There should be a degree of holding on, but not too much. Yeah. We shouldn't grasp too much that we end up with arguments and we end up with all kinds of problems because we disagree with other people in the world. So this is also another part of this. So yes, we should hold on to the extent that we can practice the path properly, but not so much that it causes problems for us. And this is another, I think, message in this particular sutta about holding on to the path in the right way. And then when you come to the other end, let's have a look at the very last part here before I talk about the very last bits here. So what do you think, mendicants? Would that person be doing what should be done with that raft? No, sir. And what mendicants should that person do with a raft? When they have crossed over, they should think, this raft has been very helpful to me. Why don't I beach it on dry land and set it adrift on the water and go wherever I want? That's what that person should do with the raft. In the same way, I have taught the simile of the raft, of the teaching as a raft, for crossing over, not for holding on. So then lastly, by understanding the simile of the raft, you will even give up the teachings, let alone what is against the teachings. And that is where it comes to an end. So let's just discuss very briefly this last part before we have a discussion about it. And so what does it mean, this idea of giving up the teachings? Yeah, we have just now seen that actually you should hold on to the teachings to some extent, not too much, because if it's too much then you end up having arguments with people and all kinds of problems. But some holding on is important, because if you don't hold on at all, you will not be moral, you will not be kind, you will not have that kind of right attitude to the path. Yeah, so it will be problematic. So a bit of holding on is important, but not too much. And then, as you actually do cross that stream, when you come to the other side, then you don't hold on to the teachings at all, it says here. You have already let go of the bad teachings, hopefully, but now you also let go of the good teachings. And what that means, again, is that you have internalized the Noble Eightfold Path. You have right view. A stream mentor is defined as someone who has right view. You are ditti patto, attained to view. And because you are attained to view, because you have right view, you don't have to hold it on anymore. Yeah? So that's why you let go of the teaching. That's why you don't hold on to right view. That's why you don't hold on to the teachings, because they are internalized. You have that as part of who you are. And so no holding on is required. And that's why it says in the suttas that the sotapanna is aparamatta, not grasping, ungrasping. And before that, there is always going to be some degree of grasping here. And this is a very important point, I think, of Dhamma, because sometimes, when you do as much teaching as I do these days, you start to realize that sometimes people, they grasp these things slightly wrongly. And one of the things that you sometimes hear, you hear about the three fetters that are given up when you become a stream mentor, right? The three fetters of Sakkaya Ditthi, Vicikiccha, and Silabbata Paramasa, the grasping of sila, of precepts and observances. And so people think that is, you should do these things to become a stream mentor. Yeah, you should give up doubt, you should give up grasping of virtue and observances, and you should give up the sense of self, the view of a self. If you do that, then you become a stream mentor. But actually, no, that is the wrong way of understanding that. It is not about giving up these three fetters through an active act of giving up. This is what happens when you become a stream mentor. It is a consequence of practicing the path, not what you should be doing. What you should be doing is practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. The consequence is that the three fetters are given up. You shouldn't try to give them up. That is not what the path is. If you try to give them up, then quite likely you will end up not practicing the path, because this is only a consequence of being a stream mentor. Only the stream mentor does no longer have to hold on to the virtue and the observances. The rest of us, we have to hold on a little bit. If you say, oh yeah, I'm not going to hold on, well, quite likely you will just do some dodgy things, right? Because, oh yeah, whatever, she'll be right. It's Australian kind of expression. And so this is the idea of this, as far as I understand, the simile of the raft, understood in the right way. So holding on, and then the natural consequence down the track is that you give up when you actually cross that flood. And that is what is going on here. Anyway, I have talked too long already. So please, we can have a bit of a discussion or whatever, so please.
Okay, let's say sadhu for the talk.
Yeah.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, any questions? No questions? Oh, there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bhante. Referring to the simile just now, the last part, that was a part of giving up even the teaching against them or something.
Yeah.
Well, what does that part actually
You mean
mean?
this part? Oh, no, sorry, it's gone now.
Yeah.
There you are. There it is.
The second part. Let alone what is against the teachings.
So we should obviously give up what is against the teachings, right? If something, because what is against the teaching is wrong. That's wrong view. So that's like saying there is no rebirth. That's against the teachings. So you should certainly give up that one. But you should also give up, eventually you should also give up the view that there is rebirth. Yeah, in other words, you shouldn't hold on to it. You shouldn't grasp it. And that's very beautiful, because as long as you grasp these things, you will tend to have arguments about them. Yeah, if you hold on to these things, then it means that you take it as part of your sense of self. You identify with those views. Yeah, they become part of who you are. And then if someone challenges that, you feel that your self is challenged, your ego is challenged, and that's why you defend it. Yeah, you might become upset if someone said something, against your sense of identity or whatever. And so, yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, is everyone happy? Yeah? Who is not happy? There's always some, you're not happy. Okay, one over here, not happy. Yeah. Yeah.
Ajahn, I'm still a bit confused, because what's the purpose of Buddha giving this teaching if you don't have to give up? Because if the time is right, the raft will just maybe disappear by itself, so there's nothing for you to hang on to. Then why would Buddha give this teaching?
I know what you mean. It's a little bit confusing, and it's not entirely clear. Why he does that? But I think I think it is a little bit like it's a kind of a mixture of not holding on too much and holding on a little bit. Yeah, and it's kind of finding that balance. I think what it is about, and especially the Dhamma is. There's a lot of kind of degrees to it, and then there is for the ordinary person, where holding on is necessary. But then there is also the viewpoint of the stream enterer. And the stream enterer may sometimes lose their way a little bit, and so it may actually be an instruction for the stream enterer to say, okay, now you have come to the other shore partly already, so now is a time for you to relax. You don't have to hold on to these teachings anymore. And sometimes the stream enterer, if they lose their mindfulness a little bit, they may actually even get into an argument perhaps or discussion with people. So it may be that the stream enterer is what is meant here, and then because that is where you train for the last part of the path to become an arahant. But usually a stream enterer will not fall into this trap, because usually they will know what they are. They know the teachings. Yeah.
Thank you, Ajahn. Just more of a question to check my understanding. So when we are talking about holding on to the teachings, how do we know we are holding on to the teachings, or are we holding on to our view about the teachings? Because if we are not a stream enterer yet, so we don't have right view. So how do we make the distinction whether are we holding on to the teachings properly, or are we holding on to a view of it, and that may lead us to like trying to win arguments with others?
Yeah, so indeed, and it is impossible to have a fully right view, before you are a stream winner or stream enterer. So it is going to be some degree of holding on, some degree of misunderstanding. It's never going to be fully purified. And so sometimes you will have arguments with the people, and that's okay. But you try to minimize it, and you understand that you try to always move in the direction of more and more purified right view. And this is a very important part of the path, is kind of purifying your view more and more. And so you start off to the best of your ability to do what you can, and then gradually moving in the right direction, purifying it more and more. That's really all you can do. But you're right, you will not be absolutely pure until you become a stream enterer. Yeah.
Thank you, Ajahn. I would like to put the perspective in a different way, in the sense that, like we ordinary people, then we need money. So the money will get us to monkhood. Then after the monkhood, we say we give up money. Can you view it like that?
So you need money until you become a monk? Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
No.
Yeah?
When you are a monk, you say, I can give up money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you should give up money. Yeah. I'm not really saying that. What I'm saying is just that the path is gradual, so you do things gradually. Yeah. Please don't give up all your money, because that would be bad for you. That would be, I'm not sure what you're going to do if you have no money. It's going to be difficult in Singapore. How are you going to pay your bills? What are you going to do? So please don't give up. Keep your money. That's what I'm saying. So that's not what the Dhamma is about. The Dhamma is not about giving up all your money. The Dhamma is about living a life of kindness. You can have money and be kind at the same time. Yeah. So just be kind. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. And that's what the Buddha is saying. What I'm saying is kind of irrelevant. But the Buddha says that, and that is really the thing. And then you live to the best of your ability. Yeah. But keep your money. Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Thank you, Bhante. I was just wondering if it's possible to interpret the simile of the raft and the grasping of the teachings as referring to a non-returner, because one of the passages does explain the inability of a non-returner to proceed to arahanthood as being held back by Dhamma raga.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting point. So you can say that you have come to the other shore, you haven't come fully to the other shore yet, or because the other shore is, what that means is kind of also open to speculation a little bit. And some suttas, they talk about the person who is standing on dry land is the arahant, and they come to the shore, he's standing in shallow water, I think, is still an anagami. But in this case, maybe it should be understood slightly differently. So yes, maybe that is an interesting possibility. That's what it means. Dhamma raga is just desire for the Dhamma, basically. And this is what you find in the Maha-Malunka-Putta Sutta, I think, and other suttas that talk about the very end of the path. So yes, I think that may well be the case. Certainly one way of looking at it. So yeah, thank you. Okay, anything else? Anyone? We have over here.
Just to enhance the teaching. I think it's similar to the Kalama Sutta, where the Buddha don't really encourage you, just believe him blindly. Kalama Sutta. AN 3.65.
Yes.
Yeah, I think this is the style of the teaching that Buddha don't really encourage. Even you believe him blindly, you have to test it for yourself, whether what he says is true. I think he encouraged people to try out for themselves. Yeah, I think it's that.
Okay, I don't think this sutta is about the same as the Kalama Sutta, because in this sutta you are someone who is already using the raft. Yeah? You have taken on board the teachings of the Buddha. You're using those teachings to cross the flood. The Kalama Sutta is really meant for people who are just starting out on the path. They're just at the very beginning, and they're kind of fumbling around, trying to find the right way. So the Kalama Sutta needs to be used with a lot of care, because sometimes people think that this is how you should think always. But the idea is that when you start out, of course, when you have to choose between different religions, different spiritual paths, then you have to be very careful, and you have to evaluate them against each other, and you have to kind of come to a decision which path is best. But once you come to a point when you have reasons to have confidence in Buddhism, that's when you take up the Noble Eightfold Path and you practice it with sincerity. And this is how you cross to the other side. Crossing to the other side here, coming to the other side, at the very least, you will be a stream entry to have crossed to the other side. Because crossing to the other side means that you are already on the safe shore, and the only person who is safe, according to the suttas, will be a stream entry. At the very least, you are a stream entry. And so there is no kind of thing about giving up the teachings or whatever is not really an option anymore at that particular point.
I think we will end there. One last question. Okay.
Hi, Bhante. I know you know your suttas very well. Can I just ask you a question?
Yeah.
You spoke about 2 similes for this particular sutta, and there were like other similes as well. It wasn't elaborated, but I read through. There was a simile for the sensual desires at the beginning, and there were like 10 listed there, and I found 7 that was in the Potaliya Sutta as well. That one. Do you know where I can find these similes for the remaining 3, the last 3?
The last 3.
Yeah. Do you know where I could find them? An explanation, because it's kind of like you still want more similes to get you don't be so attached to those.
Yeah, they are talked about in a couple of places in those other similar. At least 2 of them are talked about elsewhere, but I can't remember off the top of my head exactly where it is. So maybe some future point when I have to look it up actually to remember where it is. But they are talked about. At least 2 of them are talked about elsewhere. It gives a little bit of flesh on the bare bones. Not very much flesh, unfortunately. So there's going to have to be a little bit of interpretation going on.
It's really like the snake's head. How do you? What's they going to do with snake's head?
I think the snake's head is quite simple to interpret. It just means that something is dangerous. Yeah, it's like a snake's head. You don't want to step on the snake's head, or because they might bite you, or you don't want to put your finger near the snake's head because Yeah, I think it's kind of simple like that. But some of the other ones are a little bit more. I think it's one stakes and swords, which is a bit more, a bit more uncertain.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. I think we will end there. Any last question from you?
Ajahn, thank you for the example on the 3 factors of the Sotapanna. That is wonderful. And another one I heard was karma, because a lot of people believe rubbish about karma. So that was another one that you can grasp it by the tail and then it comes back and bite you. Then, can I just ask a quick question, Ajahn? Yeah. Because it says, a foolish person who memorizes the teachings by statements, makes prose and verse, discussions, verses, etc. So, and then we recognize these now in the context of today's world, where we have the compilation of the Udana, Iti-Vutaka, the Jatakas and all that. But to me, it's a little bit weird. So, for instance, I don't hear Ajahn Brahm say, oh, you should remember my teaching by my verses, my past life, my Jatakas, my inspired utterances. So it sounds a bit weirdish. Could it be added on later?
Well, I think, the reason why, someone like Ajahn Brahm doesn't say that, because his approach to Dhamma is going to be quite different from the Buddha, because he is a disciple, then the Buddha is kind of the master. And so the Buddha's teaching is going to be much more complete and much more rounded and have much more factors to it. Ajahn Brahm will use the same teaching, but it will come largely from his own experience and how he has understood the teachings. So it will be more limited. And I think this is one of the nice things about going to the suttas. You get the broadest possible view of what the Dhamma is, and that's why it is kind of done in this way. But it does sound a little bit strange to a modern ear, but I think part of the reason is because these are originally oral teachings, and they had to have some way of classifying things to be able to memorize things properly. And so these were probably kind of categories they used to be able to aid memorization. And so they had like headings, and so they had this way of memorizing things. Because there was, India had a very strong culture for memorizing teachings. This went back to the Vedas and the Brahmanical teachings, and that's how they were able to remember things, because they had that technology, if you like, of memorization, or that social conditioning or whatever. And so they would use that also with the suttas. And that was what enabled the memories to be so accurate over such a long period of time. The Vedas, which were the pre-existing Brahmanical literature at the time, apparently was memorized almost verbatim over hundreds and even thousands of years. So they had incredible ability to remember things and memorize things. And so they used that also in the Dhamma. And these headings may have been part of that method of memorizing things. Yeah.
Thank you, Ajahn. Ajahn, are these the 9 angas that you were talking about?
Yeah, Navanga. Yeah, Navanga, exactly. Yeah. It's the 9 factors of the teaching. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Ajahn. Let's say 3 sadhus again. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. We will end with sharing